And we're live on this Thursday morning, almost Thursday afternoon. But before we start about the NFL trade deadline and the Nets firing Steve Nash, we have some breaking news that just came in. Raiders legendary punter Ray Guy has passed away at the age of 72. Guy was with the Raiders for the majority of his career, and the entirety of his career, to be honest with you. Guy was famous for, in college, kicking one of the longest punts ever at the time. And he did the same thing in the NFL when he kicked, I think it was around a 95-yard punt. Ray Guy had passed away from what was disclosed as a lengthy battle of an illness. No details were left at this time. As I said before, Ray Guy has passed away at the age of 72. I would hope that the NFL would, at least during the Raiders game this weekend, will do a moment of silence for Ray Guy and for his family. And I hope on Thursday Night Football they do the same. Now, moving on to a little more of a joyful period of the NFL season, as the NFL trade deadline has come and gone, the Vikings traded for the Detroit Lions tight end TJ Hawkinson, and it took only a 23rd, 4th round pick and a 24th conditional 4th round pick in exchange for a 23rd, 2nd round pick and a 24th, 4th round pick. So there's really no loss here, I think, if you're either team. But that Vikings team, at least the tight end position, gets bolstered with the injury to Irv Smith last week. News that we never probably predicted at the trade deadline was the Colts fired offensive coordinator Marcus Brady. This Colts team was 3-4-1 to start the season. Not a desirable position to be in, and they also don't score a whole lot of points. Now, last week, Sam Ehlinger was the quarterback, and he was not the problem with the team. The problem was everything else on offense. They couldn't move the ball. And when they did move the ball, a lot of mistakes were made. Jonathan Taylor got a first down and then fumbles the ball. They need a field goal to go win the game after Washington scores. They can't get off the field on the defense, but they need a field goal to go win the game. Ellinger puts a perfect ball in Michael Pittman's hands, and Pittman drops it. He's had this issue for this entire year of he has a problem with the drops. He can't shake it for whatever reason. And that's cost him some games. I don't think Sam Ehlinger was the problem. I'm not saying Matt Ryan was the problem. But there was no offense, and also with no run game, and a terrible offensive line this year for whatever reason. They can't win games like that. They have to find a way to win games. Because it's not going to get easier from here. You got to face Philadelphia. You got to face Tennessee again. You're going to face the Cowboys later in the year on Thursday night, the last Thursday night game of the year. These teams run the ball, and they don't get off the field. They can go down the field easily. You're going to face teams that are going to be able to run the ball against you, or are going to be able to throw the ball against you, and they're going to go quick. They're just going to fly. So if you're the Colts, I don't think they fired the right guy. As I saw this past weekend when they had made the announcement that they had fired Marcus Brady, there was a lot of reports that came out that said he didn't fire the right guy, which I don't disagree with, because if anyone knows Indianapolis, it's Frank Reich that calls the plays. maybe there should be more discussion of, "Hey, let's figure out why this isn't working." Not, "Let's blame someone and fire them," even though they may not have really any intel at all. There was also a report that came out, according to Ian Rappaport, so there's some legitimacy here, that the Steelers are close, or there's rumblings that they could fire Mike Tomlin and put Matt Canada as the head coach. I hope it's a troll. I absolutely hope it's a troll because it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense at all. Firing Coach Tomlin would be a disgrace to the Pittsburgh Steelers organization. Would also be a disgrace because this is his first losing season as of this moment. His whole career since arriving in Pittsburgh, which I believe is 15 years long, 15, 16 years, he's had, previous to this, 14 or 15 consecutive winning seasons. And he's made playoffs with worse teams. So he's made them go 500 with a far worse team than what they already have. If anyone should be fired, it shouldn't be Tomlin. It should be their offensive coordinator who does they don't throw the ball down the field. And when they do, good things happen, but they just don't do it enough. But I digress. The Steelers also traded one of their premium wide receivers in Chase Claypool to the Bears for a 23rd second-round pick. There was a report that came out that a lot of receivers, Jerry Jeudy, Brandon Cooks, were going to get traded. I really think this trade between the Steelers and Bears for Chase Claypool created the market in terms of, well, if Claypool's going for this, I want this. There was multiple reports of players about to get traded that just were not traded. Brandon Cooks, there was a report that the Cowboys were close on that deal, and they just never got done. They ran out of time, and I don't disagree with that, but I kinda if you ever watched the Bill Belichick press conferences, which the Rich Eisen show does a great job in showing those clips every week, and every time Belichick does it, which he does it more than any coach in the league, so I assume he enjoys it. He went and said, "I don't know what close means." Like, I've been a part of deals where a deal breaks down months in advance. It gets picked up and it continues. I've been in part where deals have gone months. They've been talking about it for months and it just never gets done. I've been in trades where I talk to a guy for 6 to 10 minutes and the trade gets done. So he's obviously not going to give you anything. But I think the same thing happened here. They just ran out of time. But I also think the Claypool trade made it very different. I think if you any team that if you wanted to trade for a wide receiver this year, because this was the most productive trade deadline in terms of trades of big name players. Speaking of big name players, Broncos had traded Bradley Chubb, and if I can read my own handwriting, a 5th-round pick to the Dolphins for a 2023 first and a 2024 fourth, and Chase Edmonds to the Miami Dolphins, which I don't understand why the Broncos decide to trade Bradley Chubb. It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't. He's 25, 26 years old. He's probably the best pass rusher you have. Randy Gregory, but that's not going to help him when he comes back. It doesn't happen. It doesn't make any sense. There was a report that they could have traded Jerry Jeudy. Never happened, but it could have happened. If I'm the Broncos, I don't understand it. I also don't understand why you wanted a running back. You have Melvin Gordon. I know you lost Devontae Williams, but you bring in Latavius Murray. I understand why Chase Edmonds was the guy you wanted. If you want to sweeten the deal, why didn't you just go get you actually needed, like an offensive lineman or something else, a tight end or whatever, because this doesn't make any sense, at least in my opinion. An interesting trade went down, and I thought at first this was just nonsense, as the Falcons had traded recently suspended wide receiver Calvin Ridley to the Jacksonville Jaguars for a 2023 fifth and a 2023 second round pick. At first, I thought this was a joke because Ridley is suspended for the entirety of the 2022 season, and probably further than that. It was an indefinite suspension, so it depends how this goes. There's a whole process that has to align. The whole process is that if you're indefinitely suspended, there's a window in the off season you have to get reinstated. That's what's going to happen. I don't even think he can fly to Jacksonville. I'm not even sure on that. The crazy thing, and I saw this report after the trade deadline passed, he got caught for gambling and suspended because he gambled on the game when the Falcons were against Jacksonville. That was really hilarious to me. But I thought this was a joke. I didn't think it was possible to trade a suspended player, at least an indefinite suspended player. I didn't think that was possible. The Dolphins made another trade as they traded their 23rd fifth round pick to the 49ers for running back Jeff Wilson Sr. Again, an interesting trade for the most part. I thought they were going to roll with Mostert, but this tells you that Coach Mike McDaniel has definite ties to the 49ers, and he likes the 49er players, as he was the OC there for many years prior to getting the head coaching job in Miami. However, if you were that unconfident, like not confident in Chase Edmonds, why did you decide to make that all or nothing trade for Bradley Chubb and then go get Jeff Wilson? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. I mean, I know Wilson's a good player, but are you gonna have Mostert be the leader? Like this, I keep trying to figure out where this place goes. I don't know where it happens right now. There was also news about Bradley Chubb and the Dolphins, as Bradley Chubb and the Dolphins agreed to a 5-year extension with $119 million. A good extension, I think, for him. Again, another reason why I was like, Broncos don't want to re-sign him unless you're so confident that that first round pick is going to be a pass rusher and he's going to be the most dominant pass rusher or one of the most dominant pass rushers in the draft, which is then there's no guarantee that he is that good in the NFL. That's concerning, at least on my half, of why the Broncos made this trade. Another trade that happened was the Colts had traded Nyheim Hines, their second string running back, to the Bills for Zach Moss, their second string running back, and a conditional fifth round pick. A decision that doesn't make a whole lot of sense, in my opinion. Nyheim Hines was the perfect complementary player to Jonathan Taylor. You see any of these teams that have two good running backs, and you're like, man, that's impossible to stop. Like you look in New England, they have Damian Harris and Ramondre Stevenson. That's impossible to stop. They're very similar players, but that's impossible to stop. You look at a lot of these teams that could happen. That you just see these teams that are starting to go at two running backs. The Rams had did it a lot because they had because of Akers being injured last year. They haven't done so much since, but are big in this. And so are the Packers, where the Packers have Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. The Cowboys have Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard. Different guys, but they complement each other so well. Very similar here. Hines complimented Taylor. Taylor was more power and bruiser. Hines was more speedster, could get out and make a move. When you have players like that are very different, like I said this last week, Zeke's more of a battering ram, and Tony Pollard's more of a speedster. Zeke's more thunder, Tony's lightning. That's what they are. They're saying you need both to make this happen. But having this guy and then having this guy to get to the same goal. I thought that was what Taylor and Hines were. They decided to bring in Zach Moss, who is another kind of a boozer. But obviously he wasn't getting used too much, as Devin Singletary had been used a lot, at least in the year. Now, I normally don't discuss the NBA. Not at all. Not at all. I don't discuss the NBA at all. Period. But I am going to, because this is a very fluid situation. So I'm going to lay the groundwork. Steve Nash, 7 games into his 3rd season at the Brooklyn Nets, was fired. This stemmed from the loss in the playoffs to the Boston Celtics, who we'll get to in a minute. Or in a few minutes from now, anyway. In the summer, it was announced that Kevin Durant went to the owner of the Brooklyn Nets and said, "You're going to have to choose between firing Steve Nash and the general manager to keep me, or allow me to leave right now." And that obviously did not happen. That was the ultimatum that Durant gave him. The owner did not take it. And then after a while, it seemed to resolve. 7 games into the season, Nash was fired after a 2-5 start. But this really stems from last year, I think. And I really think Steve Nash was scapegoated to some extent, as Nash, as it was his 3rd season, he won a playoff series in his 1st year. But you can say that was Kyrie and KD, whatever. Go ahead. There was so much that happened, though, in his 2nd year that I think we have not discussed. Or even in his 1st year, we did not discuss. The trade for James Harden. Durant, Kyrie wanted James Harden. And so Durant, Kyrie got James Harden. They traded a boatload for James Harden, and they traded a lot of their bench players. Spencer Dinwiddie was traded and went to so here comes James Harden. And it didn't work. It just didn't work. Because you had 3 great players that just could not play together for whatever reason. And in the 2nd year of Steve Nash coaching the Brooklyn Nets, Harden decides he wants to get traded. And he forces a trade. And he decides to get traded. And he gets traded to the 76ers for Ben Simmons and a couple draft picks. Now, this is a problem, because not just that you trade James Harden away, you trade him for Ben Simmons, who hasn't played at all that year, and wouldn't play though at all that year. He wouldn't play. And since he hadn't played, he would just sit on the bench, and we were discussing more, as bad as the Nets, we were discussing more about Ben Simmons' fashion statements than we were the Brooklyn Nets as a whole. They found a way to make it to the play-in, and they win a play-in game. They make it to the playoffs where they have to face the Celtics. And this is where it gets interesting, because to me, I thought this was where Nash just didn't cut it, at least for this point, as they decided to play a smaller lineup to go against the Celtics big men that were Al Horford and Robert Williams, which I was surprised by. I thought they would have played a lot more of Blake Griffin. They didn't. Or Marcus Aldridge. I know he was hurt, but they didn't. They decided to go small. And they ended up getting swept. So fast forward into the summer when this ultimatum takes place. Doesn't happen. We get into the season and it doesn't go well. Simmons is starting to play, but there's a couple clips that you could find on YouTube of KD, Kyrie, and other players saying, "Ben, just shoot the ball. You're open. Shoot. Even if you miss, just shoot the ball. Shoot a three. Do something. You're not doing anything." And I think he also he had fouled out in the first game of the year. It just he didn't look comfortable. He looked antsy. He looked slow. There was problems. It was like it obviously looked like he hadn't played in a while. So Nash gets fired, which I don't agree with. I don't think he should deserve to be fired. I wanted to see how the season went, and if it happened, it happened. But I don't think it should have happened this quick. Then there was a report that the Nets wanted to hire former Celtics head coach Ime Udoka. Udoka was an assistant to Steve Nash when in the second year. In the first year, excuse me. In the first year. Then he got the Boston job after a recommendation from Steve Nash. So he is qualified to be a Brooklyn Nets head coach from that perspective. However, Udoka was suspended to go against Celtic policy, the company policy of having a consensual relationship with a higher up lady who was married. He wasn't, but she was. This got a lot of media flack for obvious reasons. The media flack that it got was Coach Udoka's name was run through the mud because the Celtics made this public, which they didn't make the lady's name public, which I still don't agree with because I would want to know, because now you've opened this can of worms, as they used to say when you're a kid, you open this can of worms. Might get something from FedEx today for Dad. Okay. I think if it does come, it's going to be the window things. Okay, well, I'm streaming, so you're gonna be quiet. She's in her room. Okay. Anyway, so Coach Udoka gets suspended for a consensual relationship. They made it media-wise, I don't know why, but they did. They should have made this quiet. They should have dealt with it internally. They chose not to. For whatever reason, they chose not to. And in doing this, when they decided to open and make this public, it added, well, who was the woman that was involved? You're very bad at staying quiet, Mo. You're very bad at this. Holy cow. So, anyway, they decide to not make the lady's name known, which caused problems. Which then ESPN decided, or at least Malika Andrews, who works for ESPN and works on NBA Today, decided to put Ime Udoka through the gutter the whole time. Just put him through the ringer at any point they could. Well, he did this, he should be punished, this is illegal. None of that's true. It's just against company policy. None of that was true. And then go on First Take and say, the woman shouldn't have been discussed, but Ime Udoka deserved to be fired. Which, it doesn't make any sense. Which again made Stephen A., the host of the show, very upset. And rightfully so, because you're on his show and you're saying that he was saying something wrong, which he wasn't. Celtics felt they dealt with it accordingly in suspending him indefinitely. They didn't fire him. I would have never made it public. I would have said, look, we're dealing with this internally. We decided Coach Udoka is suspended. We're not talking about it. We're not discussing it. I'm giving my players free reign that if you do talk about it, then they can walk out of this press conference. I don't care if they're fined. I don't care if I'm fined. We're not talking about it. And if they said that no, if they would have decided internally to fire Coach Udoka, that they would have said, we have decided that Coach Ime Udoka is no longer the head coach of the Boston Celtics. We're not discussing it. We're not having our players discuss it. If you do ask them questions about it, they will. They can feel free to walk out. They can walk out. I'm giving them that ability because it's not right. It's not right. Of what Boston did in putting his name through the mud, but deciding not to do the women's name, put the women's name in the mud. And I said the same thing about. I said it at the time. I was like, Boston shouldn't have done that, and now people are wanting to know who the woman is. I get it. Boston never made it public. Maybe they should have. Maybe they shouldn't have. I don't know. They chose not to. ESPN, Malika Andrews, went and said, he deserved to be fired. He has to be accountable. Just against Celtic policy, okay? Like I said before, just against Celtic policy. Nothing, not every NBA policy. This is like if you go and date somebody, okay? If you go date somebody in school or in anything, we may have to go, say, if we work together, we may have to go through a certain procedure to say, hey, we're dating, let's make this legitimate through the company and stuff. That's reasonable. But I'm very certain it's not your responsibility to know what happens in a relationship. And that's what Malika Andrews was trying to do. She's like, we must know what was going on. I'm like, no, we don't. We don't need to know what's going on. And so Boston decided to suspend him, which she was angered about. The Celtics had suspended Coach Udoka on September 21st. As of now, it's November 3rd. So it's been a little over a month. And there's rumors that Coach Udoka is not just a likely candidate to get the head coaching job, that he's more certain to get the head coaching job, at least at this point. And he could start coaching as soon as next week if this happens. Now, I had questions because I don't remember any time in history this had happened. And how would this work? Supposedly, according to the rules, there's two lanes that you can go. Either you trade the coach to the team or you don't. The Celtics have decided to not accept compensation if this happens, if Coach Udoka becomes the coach of the Nets. Which brings me back to Malika Andrews. I don't understand what her beef is with Coach Udoka. It doesn't make any sense. You're not hiring him. You can't be mad at him being hired and getting another job. I think he deserves another job. Maybe not this quickly. I would agree on that, but he deserves another job. That's my opinion. But it wasn't that made me mad, even though it did kind of it frustrated me a little bit. What made me mad was this. The Celtics had decided they weren't going to name a head coach because it was too close to the season. So they named an interim head coach, and I hope I pronounced his name right. If I don't, I apologize. I'm terrible with names. Their interim head coach is Joe Mazzulla. Now, why is that so specific? Why should I know that? Because when he was named interim head coach, Mazzulla was named interim head coach. And like anything, he has a past prior to being a coach. Everyone does. Anyone knows that if you're a mechanic or a professional person, you have something before your career and after your career. People don't care about before your career and after your career. They care about your career. Because you're in the limelight. That makes a whole lot of sense. Malika Andrews, somehow, and whoever got this information to her, whether it was her or somebody else, deserved to be fired. I really think this. Like, they deserve to be fired. Said that Mazzulla has a record as he was caught for underage drinking in college and all this stuff. First of all, hello. Give me a couple minutes on this. Anyone who's grown up has made mistakes. I've made mistakes. Eventually, I hope I'm forgiven for it. Eventually. I hope so. But I know I gotta move forward. I know that can make me a better person. But also, this happened when he was in college. So when did this happen? 6, 10 years ago? What's the validity of it? Why is it valid now? It's not. It's not valid. If your only reason of saying this is because you hate men, then that's a whole different issue, and that should be a firing on its own. Because you don't even understand why this job is important. But you're like, Mazzulla got caught for underage drinking, he had to pay a fine. Something else happened, he had to pay a fine and have community service. Why is that valid? There's nothing valid about it. And I kept covering my eyes. I'm like, oh my gosh, this lady's insane. She's just insane. It doesn't make any sense. It's like, yes, happened 10 years ago. It's not valid today. And also, you made mistakes in college. You did some things in college that you wish you could take back. You did. Everyone does. And sometimes it's not college. Sometimes it's younger. Sometimes it's high school. Sometimes it's even younger than that. There's things you regret. That's what I'm trying to say. There's things you regret. If Mazzulla did that in college, why is it valid now? It doesn't make any sense to me. But if you're ESPN, why didn't you say something to her? Is my question. You had her go on First Take, and you had Stephen A., which, by the way, these debate shows, one person's going to be one way, the other person's going to be the other way. That's the way it is. Otherwise, it doesn't make good television. It just does. If everyone both agreed on the same thing, it doesn't make good television. They need someone to scream at somebody. And the same goes here. But I don't understand her viewpoint, because then when it was announced that Udoka is a likely candidate for the head coaching job, because there's very few things that could happen. Either he has the head coaching job, he's in consideration for the head coaching job, or he's not considered for the head coaching job. Either way, there's 3 things to this. She got mad that he was even considered for the coaching job. He's not a bad coach. And then she tried to play it off like, I don't forget the fact of how good he was as a coach in Boston, but this incident happened and I can't condone it. And it's like, what are you talking about? Are you just saying this because you're a woman and it needs to be said? I'm sorry if it is. I'm sorry. But it doesn't make sense. There's no reason for you to be talking about this, especially almost 2 months after it happened. After it happened 2 months later, when no one's talking about it. By the way, bravo for the people who were at that debate, uh, that were on that round table at the time when they were having to go through all this. They stayed away from it. Bravo by their approach. I would have tried to do the same. I'm not saying I would have succeeded to do the same. Probably been ranting and raving, but like I am right now. But I'm happy they stayed away from it. But they kept panning back to her and her disgruntled of no one's saying it. There has to be accountability and stuff like that. I mean, Celtics are doing whatever they can to be accountable. They suspended him. They felt like they dealt with it accordingly. They felt like they dealt with it accordingly, whether you like it or not. Maybe they should have fired him. In fact, I believe that's what Stephen A. said. They either keep him or fire him. They chose to suspend him. Now, I wouldn't have made it public. I would not have done that because if we were to decide to fire him, that leaves his integrity and his reputation intact. If anything, would be like, why would you fire him? That would be the only question, and then you don't have to answer it. But I don't understand why they decided, you know what, Malika, go ahead, go say this for no reason, even though it's 2 months old, essentially, or close to 2 months old. Because you got to think, as I said, this is November 3rd. He was suspended September 21st. It doesn't make any sense that he deserved. I mean, does he deserve a head coaching job? Yes. I said I wouldn't have done it this quickly, but yes, he deserved another head coaching job. Absolutely. But there's got to come a point in time when ESPN's going to go, hey, you can't do this. Like this guy's reputation, he's already at the bottom of the barrel right now. He's suspended. He's not paid. He's at the bottom of the barrel. He's got nothing. At least he's living off his savings at this point. And if he's living off his savings at this point, that means he's not a threat to you. You don't have to stand up because you're a woman and this happened against a woman. I remember I was listening to something earlier today that they tried, ESPN or Malika Andrews tried to say. She said it wasn't consensual. Which, why are you spewing out misinformation? The report that came out said it was consensual. I'm not saying that he should have done it, absolutely not. But when you make that public and you put his name through the grinder and you just say, okay, let's see what happens, it's going to cause, well, who was the woman? And when then you go and say, well, the women don't need to be on. It's like, he didn't do it. He wasn't married. Like, yes, he did it. Should he have done it? No. Am I upset that he did it? Am I upset that he got fired for it? No, because he probably deserved to get fired for it. But at least he would have had his reputation intact. You didn't have to go and say, well, the woman had nothing to do with it. If it's consensual, she did. The moral of the story is this: ESPN, fix your host or don't put him on there. Because when you have a take like that, and you don't stop bringing it up. It does what it does right now. It makes everyone upset. It turns everyone off. People don't pay attention, especially when most of your demographic who watch are men. It doesn't make any sense for you to have a person who hates, or not hates, but doesn't like what a man does. At that point, you're just wasting a person's time, and why is they gonna watch you? They're not. And if you're mad that someone doesn't agree with you and decide not to put them on ever again, if you decide to not put them on, that doesn't make you any better than what anyone else would have done. Doesn't make you better. In fact, it makes you worse. You got to, I'm not forgive him, but you can't go and decide, I want to tear this guy down even more than he already is. It's just not worth it. Now, we will do a regularly scheduled weekly videos for next week, and hopefully we will have a stream on Wednesday of next week, depending on how the week goes. But if you would all hit the like button and subscribe, it would be most appreciated.